I never expected betrayal to arrive in my own living room, served cold, casual, and wrapped in the voice of my younger sister. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of evening when Portland rain feels like a curtain pulled over the world. I had just stepped inside our apartment in the Pearl District, exhausted from reviewing datasets all day at Insight Bridge, when Elowen stood in the hallway with her arms folded and a look that made my stomach tighten. "Mira," she said, tilting her head like she was delivering wise advice instead of a verdict. "I think it's time you moved out for a while." I blinked. "Moved out? What are you talking about?" "You know, so I can finally be independent. I can't grow if you're always here." Her tone was gentle, but the message hit me like a slap. "Elle," I said slowly, "I'm the one paying the rent." She shrugged, almost annoyed. "Well, yes, for now, but that's not the point. I need space. I need to prove I can live on my own." I looked at her, really looked. My sister who'd had 5 jobs in 2 years. My sister who once cried because her card got declined at Safeway and I quietly transferred money so no one would see. My sister who posted self-help quotes about freedom while using my savings for her phone bill. "Elowen, you're asking me to leave my own apartment." "It's not your apartment," she snapped, and my chest tightened. "It's ours, and I need it more." That was it. No discussion, no gratitude, no memory of the nights I saved her from eviction notices. I packed 2 bags, grabbed my laptop, and called a rideshare. The rain was heavier now, sliding down the windows as if the sky was embarrassed for me. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even ask why. Instead, I moved into a cramped studio in Northeast Portland with peeling paint, a shaky heater, and a bed that creaked whenever I breathed. When the door shut behind me, I opened my laptop and clicked into the folder only I knew existed, my personal ledger. Every transfer, every bill, every receipt I paid on her behalf. 2 years of being the safety net no one acknowledged. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, but before I could close the screen, my phone buzzed. The family group chat lit up with new messages. Elowen had posted a boomerang video, she and her boyfriend, Niven Rowe, clinking champagne glasses in the living room I had vacated only hours earlier. Her caption read, "Finally free, finally independent." Niven added in the comments, "Proud of you, babe. Some people just hold us back." A laughing emoji followed. I felt something pull tight inside my chest. Not heartbreak, not anger, something colder, something like recognition. They weren't celebrating independence. They were celebrating my absence. I saved the screenshots, not out of pettiness, but out of instinct. Something told me this wasn't the end of the story. That instinct proved right. Later that night, my phone rang. It was a number only a handful of people used. "Mira?" The voice was deep, controlled, almost clinical. My grandfather, Gordian Lark. "I'd like you to come to dinner tomorrow," he said. "Family only. 6 o'clock. Larkwood House." My pulse kicked. My grandfather didn't invite people. He summoned them. And his dinners were never about food. They were about information, patterns, behavior. He'd built Lark's Harvest, one of the West Coast's most influential grocery empires, by reading people the way most men read stock charts. "Did something happen?" I asked. Long silence. Then, "I think you already know." He hung up. I stared at my cracked studio ceiling, the rain tapping like impatient fingers. An icy certainty settled in my stomach. This wasn't about sisterly conflict. This wasn't about moving out. This was something bigger, something calculated, something my grandfather had been watching unfold long before I realized I was even part of a test. And tomorrow night, I would find out exactly what he already knew. The drive to Larkwood House felt heavier than the rain pouring over Lake Oswego. My fingers drummed the steering wheel, not from impatience, but calculation. I knew my grandfather, Gordian Lark, well enough to understand. This dinner wasn't about salad choices or polite conversation. It was a test, a measure, a reckoning. I arrived to the familiar stone facade of the estate, the sprawling grounds dim under gray clouds. The entryway smelled of old wood, polished floors, and faint citrus, a scent of control. Inside, Elowen was already perched on a high-backed chair in the dining room, Niven Rowe at her side, wine glass in hand, grinning like a co-conspirator in some private victory. "Finally, some peace and quiet," Elowen said, barely glancing at me. "Feels like this space is actually mine now." Niven laughed, loud and forced. Independence suits you, Elle. I didn't reply. I set my coat on the rack, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest. Everything about the room screamed opulence, authority, yet I felt no intimidation. I had my data. I had facts. I had patterns. Dinner was a study in restraint and subtle power. Elowen spoke endlessly of her growth and learning responsibility. Niven nodded like a trained seal. My grandfather listened without expression, his pale eyes scanning, measuring, assessing. When the last course was cleared, he stood, slowly, methodically. The weight in the room shifted. He handed each of us a cream envelope, wax-sealed with the Lark family crest. He didn't speak, only said once, "I want the truth from each of you." I opened mine carefully. Inside was a small brass key and a note with only 5 words. "You know where it goes." I didn't hesitate. I rose, excusing myself from the table with a polite nod. The hall smelled of leather-bound books and faint candle smoke. I navigated to the old library, a 2-story room with towering shelves. Each step echoed as if announcing my intrusion. I found the hidden panel and inserted the key. The door clicked, revealing a small auxiliary office. Rows of boxes and meticulously labeled binders stared back at me. I pulled the first ledger. My heart raced, not from fear, but anticipation. Every single payment I had made on Elowen's behalf for 2 years was here. Rent transfers, utility bills, emergency medical payments, even the deposit for her trip to the coast she had earned with my assistance. Nothing was missing. And then I noticed anomalies, funds moving in ways I hadn't anticipated. One series of transfers linked to Niven Rowe. He'd been using the Holiday name to secure funding for a business project that didn't exist, routing cash through shell companies. I traced patterns, dates, and invoices. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just incompetence or childish indulgence. It was exploitation. Back at Insight Bridge the next day, I was assigned to analyze a marketing campaign for a client that intersected with one of Niven's shell companies. I flagged the account for irregularities, but I didn't mention Niven by name. I recommended halting the collaboration due to lack of transparency. I knew it would trigger an audit without my having to act as judge or executioner. I was simply doing my job. By evening, my grandfather's assistant, Marjorie Hale, s'enquête. She confirmed that tomorrow there would be a formal family meeting. "Bring what you believe is necessary," she said, her voice crisp and precise. She didn't clarify further. She didn't need to. I sat in my studio that night, the faint hum of my laptop and the city lights outside a stark contrast to the storm of calculations in my head. Every spreadsheet, every bank record, every time-stamped receipt was a data point in a system only I had built. Yet the purpose had shifted. It was no longer about protecting myself. It was about understanding exactly what Gordian Lark had been observing. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Not just my sister's independence, not just Niven's opportunism. It would be about boundaries, accountability, and who truly understood the cost of privilege and responsibility in this family. And for the first time in years, I felt ready. The boardroom at Larkwood House was deceptively warm. Golden lights glimmered off the polished oak, but the air carried a chill that made each breath feel deliberate, measured. My grandfather, Gordian Lark, sat at the head of the table like a sentinel. I positioned myself directly across from Elowen and Niven, keeping my hands folded on the table. Every eye in the room seemed to weigh me before I had even opened my mouth. Marjorie Hale, my grandfather's assistant and the family's legal executor, stepped forward, her tablet glowing in the soft light. She began methodically. Exhibit A, transfers from Ms. Mira Holliday to Ms. Elowen Holliday over the past 24 months, total $42,780. These funds were provided to cover rent, utilities, and essential expenses, all logged and verified. Elowen's face tightened. She opened her mouth, ready to spin her narrative. "Mira's keeping these records to trap me?" I said, cutting her off with a calm, neutral voice. "No, I've always managed numbers. This is habit, Elle, not a setup. I am not asking for recognition, nor am I seeking restitution. I simply stopped underwriting expenses that should fall within your own responsibility. That's all." Her lip curled, disbelief flashing. "You're framing this like a trial." "Factually," I corrected, my tone steady. "These are facts. I'm not the judge, I'm the observer." Marjorie clicked her tablet. Exhibit B, contracts and fund applications submitted under the Holiday family name by Mr. Niven Rowe. Investigations reveal multiple instances of falsified documentation for non-existent ventures. Dates, correspondence, and bank records corroborate this pattern. This coincides with Ms. Holliday's independent spending ledger. Niven's jaw tightened. This is absurd. I was just helping with paperwork. She's twisting everything. His voice rose, a mixture of panic and aggression. Elwyn is incapable of managing anything. She's weak, high maintenance. No one could support her. It's her fault He froze as Marjorie's eyes locked on him. The room fell into suffocating silence. He sputtered, searching for words, and then muttered, I was just trying to make things work. Elwyn's confident facade cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, fear overtook arrogance. I didn't mean to, she stammered, her voice raw. I just wanted attention. I didn't know. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I studied her closely. The bravado, the smirks, the endless posts claiming independence, it all evaporated in an instant. What remained was fear, real and palpable, the kind that makes someone shrink under scrutiny for the first time. My chest tightened, not with triumph, but with recognition. This was not the sister I had sparred with for years. This was someone unmasked by reality, and it was terrifying. Marjorie turned to my grandfather. His pale eyes didn't leave me, but his presence dominated the room. He was quiet, letting the facts speak, letting their consequences settle. Niven shifted in his seat, realizing every bluff, every attempt at justification had failed. His schemes, entwined with Elwyn's dependence, had collapsed. Elwyn's gaze finally met mine. I did not look away, not with anger, not with vindication. I just observed the collapse of her constructed world, the Instagram victories, the illusions of self-sufficiency, the reliance on my support, was complete. She was small, human, vulnerable in a way I hadn't allowed myself to see before. My grandfather's voice cut through the tension, low but sharp. Elwyn, independence is not measured by empty declarations or borrowed resources. Accountability begins with recognition of boundaries. Responsibility is not about performance for others' approval. The words hung in the room like a verdict. I felt a strange weight lift from my shoulders. The truth was out. Facts were presented. Consequences were clear. And for the first time, no one could manipulate the system, not even her. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting the moment settle. No shouting, no public spectacle, just clarity. The meeting was only beginning, but the first layer of illusion had already been stripped away. And I knew, deep down, the next moves would determine everything: our family, our legacy, and the unspoken hierarchy of who truly understood responsibility. The silence that followed the trustee's verdict hung over the room like a storm cloud. Elwyn slumped in her chair, pale and trembling, while Niven shifted nervously, avoiding every eye. My grandfather, Gordian Lark, rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate, the cane tapping a measured rhythm on the polished floor. Elwyn, he began, his voice low but carrying across the boardroom like a gavel. You have violated the family's principles of honesty and financial accountability. Your discretionary access to the family trust is suspended immediately. Her hands went to her face. I didn't mean to. Intentions are irrelevant, he said, cutting her off. Actions define responsibility. You will have 6 months to demonstrate complete independence. Your lease must be in your name. You must secure a reliable income. You will rely on no one, and you will allow no one to exploit you. Only then will your access be reconsidered. Elwyn's eyes widened, the gravity of the mandate finally sinking in. She tried to protest, but her voice was thin, almost unrecognizable. And Niven Rowe, my grandfather continued in, shifting his gaze, you are hereby excluded from any and all family business activities, personal or corporate. Your influence over any family member or enterprise is terminated. Our partners will be notified of the risks associated with your involvement in any ventures linked to the Holiday name. Niven's shoulders stiffened. You can't do this. This is outrageous. It is not personal, my grandfather replied without emotion. It is protection. Boundaries are not negotiable. I sat quietly, letting the words wash over the room. There was no applause, no relief, only the sharp clarity of consequences and responsibility. For the first time in years, the air was free of manipulation, of hidden debts, of obligation cloaked as affection. Finally, my grandfather turned to me. His pale blue eyes rested on mine, scanning, weighing. Mira Holiday, he said. Not a compliment, not praise, observation. You have maintained boundaries that most in this family fail to establish. You have kept the ledger of truth, and in doing so, preserved not only your integrity, but the integrity of our principles. I swallowed, unsure if I should say anything. He did not wait. Effective immediately, you will oversee the Lark Renewal Fund. A modest endowment, yes, but with full autonomy. Its purpose: to support family members who seek education, training, or an independent path. You will determine the rules, the approvals, the disbursements. You will enforce accountability and measure results. You will wield authority, but not inheritance. The power is the reward. I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what he had entrusted to me. No titles, no wealth, only responsibility and decision-making power. This was the true currency he valued. The ability to act justly and strategically. Elowin, still pale, glanced at me with a mixture of a fear, confusion, and something I almost recognized as respect. Niven muttered something under his breath, but the words were swallowed by the room's tension. You will implement the fund immediately, my grandfather added. Rules will be transparent. Audits will be enforced. Performance will be verified. No one will manipulate the system. Not now, not ever. The boardroom felt unusually quiet after that. No one spoke. I could hear the faint hum of the ventilation system, the clicking of Marjorie Hale's tablet, and my own heartbeat in my ears. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what had shifted, not just the family dynamics, but the moral architecture I now commanded. I realized, standing there in the neutral, authoritative space between judgment and execution, that I was no longer the sister who absorbed chaos and debt silently. I was the strategist, the enforcer of fairness, the guardian of accountability, the custodian of boundaries, and my grandfather's final words, quiet but deliberate, hung in my mind as I left the room. Power without boundaries is chaos. Mira, you now have both. Do not fail the measure. For the first time, I felt the sharp clarity of justice, tempered with responsibility. This was not triumph over my sister. This was the construction of order from a legacy of disorder, and I was now at its center. I returned to my small studio in northeast Portland, the rain having stopped hours ago. The city smelled faintly of wet asphalt and pine from the park blocks, sharp and clean. I placed the last envelope my grandfather, Gordian Lark, had handed me onto the kitchen counter. It was unassuming, cream-colored, heavier than expected. I slid my fingers across the seal and unfolded its contents. Inside was a single photograph, faded to soft sepia tones. A young man, barely 20, stood before a tiny, dimly lit room with peeling paint and a cracked window. The caption on the back, written in my grandfather's angular script, was simple, deliberate. Freedom begins the first time you pay for your own room. I held it in my hand and allowed myself a small smile, not the triumph of winning a battle, not the vindication I had imagined, but the quiet release of responsibility finally acknowledged and returned. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of weight lifting from my shoulders. The ledger, the endless calculations of debts and bailouts, the constant invisible labor I had performed to keep the family afloat. It was now behind me. My phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. A message from Elowin. My heart tightened. I hesitated before unlocking it. The text was succinct, yet deliberate. She had signed a lease for a small studio in Beaverton. She had accepted a position at a local graphic studio that also involved writing. Her words were clear. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm starting over, on my own. I stared at the message for a long moment. Relief, yes, but also a quiet pride. No gloating, no recrimination, no dramatic fireworks. Just a subtle, necessary acknowledgement that she would finally stand on her own 2 feet. I typed a brief reply. Understood. Good luck. Make it yours. I put the phone down and leaned against the edge of the counter. The apartment was small, sparse, sterile in its own way, but it was mine. Every bill, every key, every decision I made in the next months would belong entirely to me. I could rebuild my life here, with autonomy instead of obligation, and clarity instead of the constant fog of guilt and responsibility. The family had not been defeated. No one had been exiled or shamed beyond repair. The lessons were subtle but profound. Elowin had been forced to confront her dependence, her impulsiveness, and the consequences of her actions. Niven Rowe had been removed from every shadow of influence over the Holiday family and their ventures, and I, Well, I had been entrusted with a form of power that mattered far more than money: the ability to enforce boundaries, to uphold fairness, to set the standard for responsibility within the family. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline, the sun glinting off the Willamette, faint fog rolling across the bridges. The city moved, indifferent yet alive, a mirror to the clarity I felt. The truth was simple. Fairness was not about punishing anyone. It was about establishing balance. Timing, boundaries, and accountability, these were the pillars on which the family and our future would rest. I sank into the armchair, opening my laptop, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't have to check my ledger or scroll through dated transactions. I had done my part. The system had responded, the lessons had landed, and a new order had been quietly set. A thought flickered across my mind. This story, this long, grueling chapter of control, chaos, and revelation, it had been lived by many, but I had survived it. And perhaps, just perhaps, others could learn from it. If you've listened from the beginning, I want to ask you, did this story resonate with you? Do you want to hear more tales about women navigating family, power, and independence? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. I'd love to know what themes you'd like me to explore next. And if you enjoyed this journey, please like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There are many more stories of women asserting boundaries, reclaiming autonomy, and facing the intricate web of family, society, and ambition waiting to be told. Let's hear them together. I leaned back, finally allowing myself a full breath. The past, the debts, the invisible labor, it was all behind me. The future was mine, bounded, fair, and entirely real.